welcome to the Animal Training Academy Making Ripples podcast show, the show where we share the stories of the ripple-making extraordinaires with behavior nerd superpowers who make up the Animal Training Academy membership. I'm your host and one of the happiness engineers at Animal Training Academy, Shelly Wood from Drop Your Jaws Dog Training in Cape Girardeau, Missouri in the United States. We're absolutely thrilled and grateful to have you here with us today. Make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss a single episode. This show is brought to you on behalf of the Animal Training Academy membership. So if you like the conversations in these episodes, then we want to invite you to continue them with like-minded people in the ATA membership, which you can find out more about at www.atamember.com. Within the membership, you can get access to twice monthly live web classes, the back catalog of previous web class replays, plus a huge library of videos and projects to help you problem solve your training challenges. And we're a sociable bunch with an exclusive private Facebook group and forums area. It's like a Netflix social media platform for animal behavior geeks. Today, we are excited to welcome Debbie Sykes to the show. Debbie has been a wildlife rehabilitator since 2006, playing every role from volunteer to educator to animal care director. She is currently a wildlife veterinary technician for the Teaching Hospital Midwestern University, a certified veterinary technician with VEGER for pets, an independent consultant for wildlife rehabilitators and educators, is the speaker chair for the Clinical Animal Behavior Conference held in Chicago, and an instructor for the International Wildlife Rehabilitation Council. Previous roles include the Director of Nashville Wildlife Conservation, Assistant Animal Care Director at Walden's Puddle Rehabilitation Center, a Behavior Technician for Veterinary Behavior Solutions, and a Hoofstock Intern at the Nashville Zoo. Debbie graduated from Northern Arizona University with a Bachelor of Science in Biology and Volunteer State Community College with an Associate's in Veterinary Technology. Her career experiences have led her to focus on bringing awareness and increasing the quality of care for wildlife patients and educational ambassadors. She is always learning more and encourages others to always ask questions. Welcome, Debbie. We're very excited to have you here with us today.
Oh my gosh. I've been listening to Animal Training Academy now for over 10 years. So I'm excited to talk about helping wildlife and zoological companion animals thrive on the sister podcast. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And thank you for joining me. I'm excited to hear you talk about all of those things. We have touched on a little bit of wildlife rehabilitation in this podcast before, but not a whole lot. And reading your bio, you have a pretty extensive background in wildlife rehabilitation and care. So I'm excited to learn a lot from you today. Could you start us off by telling us your story, how you started working with animals and how you made it to the work that you're doing today?
Yeah, well, I stumbled into wildlife rehabilitation in 2006 when I was taking an ecology class in Southern California. One of our field trips was to a local wildlife rehabilitation center, and I learned that they accepted volunteers, so immediately started volunteering there. From then, I completely fell in love and, had been doing it almost ever since. I took a short break while I finished college and really figured out where I wanted to live, which turned out to be Nashville. So moved there. I started volunteering at a wildlife hospital there and was hired on in 2012. Those, first few years were pretty heartbreaking though. Our survival rates were incredibly low. We dealt with constant disease outbreaks, cannibalism, and really just daily losses. The animals that did survive didn't always leave us in the condition we hoped for. So we kept getting told from the higher ups, this is just wildlife rehabilitation. It's normal for wild animals to die, and this is part of it. But that answer never really sat right with me or my colleagues. So we would constantly reach out to other wildlife rehabilitators and centers for help. They were incredibly very grateful that they would help us at all. They would offer us kind of simple solutions. So, you just need to change the diet, make sure you're doing this diet instead of this diet, add more hiding places, those kinds of things. And again, I was very grateful to those people who were willing to help, but these never solved the actual problem. And when Elisa took over the center, it all made sense why. So for me, and I think for all the animals, all the staff, everything changed in 2017 when we hired a new animal care director whose personal mission is really to improve quality of care in wildlife rehabilitation centers. So she would go into rehabilitation centers all over North America, so United States and Canada, and just help make them better and then move on to another center. And for that, she became really one of the most influential mentors in my career. And even to this day, I call her at least once a week for advice and help. She taught me to stop looking at care from our perspective and to start taking a step back and learning it from the animal's point of view. So originally we were checking boxes. Did we give this squirrel a stick? Did we give them the diet? Those kinds of things, but really learning how to actually meet their needs from their point of view. So that shift completely transformed the way I approach wildlife care. And after working with her for a bit, she eventually empowered me to overhaul our education animal program, where I was incredibly fortunate to work with another wonderful mentor, Gail Buell, who I consider the screech owl queen. She is, when it comes to the LIMA, the least intrusive, minimally aversive approach, she is so knowledgeable and has so much experience with them. So at the time, believe it or not, there weren't many people doing positive reinforcement training with wildlife in rehabilitation centers. So most of my learning was done through trainers at the Nashville Zoo. I also, like you mentioned earlier, had the opportunity to work with a board certified veterinary behaviorist with cats and dogs, and then also would send countless videos of me training with wildlife to Gail. So she would patiently watch them, rewatch them with me, help me interpret what the animals were communicating and guide me towards better solutions. So that taught me, behavior is one of the most valuable communication tools we have, as long as we're willing to listen and we learn how to interpret it properly. And, I love wildlife rehabilitation. So I hope I get to do it every day for the rest of my life. But realistically, it is a Band-Aid. And so from the outside, it can sound like success when wildlife rehabilitation centers say, I doubled our admissions this year, or we admitted 500 more animals this year. But when you're the one admitting those animals every single day and seeing the trauma that happens and having 90 to 95% of those injuries being preventable, it's pretty heartbreaking and it can burn you out a bit. So behind every admission is an individual animal that didn't need to be there in the first place. And after seeing the same preventable injuries over and over again, so I would say like most common would be cat caught baby rabbits or cat caught songbirds that were just learning to fledge by indoor-outdoor cats, fledgling birds that were kidnapped by well-meaning people, turtles that were hit by lawnmowers, those kinds of things. I realized the real opportunity wasn't just treating patients, it was preventing them from becoming patients in the first place. So one of the things I really kind of took into consideration when I was working at the Nashville Zoo is that we grow up learning about lions and elephants and all these incredible animals that are very important when it comes to conservation, right? But they live sometimes halfway around the world. But very few of us are ever taught about the wildlife sharing our own space, and it really creates a big disconnect. So we would get calls every day saying, help, there's a possum in our backyard. Like, yeah, that's where it's supposed to be. Or, I found this box turtle in my backyard, so I brought it to a pond and released it. I just wanted you to know. And you're like, well, that box turtle was supposed to be in your backyard, and they actually aren't great swimmers. They're not aquatic turtles. So these people genuinely just didn't know, right? Nobody ever taught them. So that's when we started thinking about education differently. It's not just about sharing information and, going beyond connection. It's creating behavior change. So helping people make one small decision differently the next time they encounter wildlife, or really just thinking about wildlife existing in their own backyard. So focusing on changing the human behavior upstream to prevent those injuries before they ever happen. And I do know there was an Animal Training Academy podcast many years ago. I believe it was prior to COVID, where that was one of the things that struck me, as she talked a lot about behavior change. So that realization led a group of us to create Nashville Wildlife Conservation. And our goal was to connect, conserve, and coexist with wildlife already living in our own neighborhoods. And really, our main goal was to show that coexistence doesn't require a huge lifestyle change. That was a skill I didn't learn well, right? So I'd go in and just throw up a bunch of information at people about how cool these animals are and all the reasons that they're dying and how people need to change everything. But thankfully, I had another incredible mentor, Dr. Amanda Heelan, come into the picture. And she really helped us dive into science communication. So she showed us how to take these complex conservation challenges and turn them into simple, practical actions that empowered people instead of overwhelming them. She called them CTAs, or calls to action, which I love. And conservation became so much more powerful when we had these simple CTAs like mow at the highest setting to prevent running over, box turtles or bunnies, or leave them alone, simple things like that to help really shape human behaviors. And we started to see a lot of successfully reunited or injuries being prevented before they happen, those kinds of behaviors, which was really exciting for us. And people would call us and tell us those things. I mowed at the highest setting today, and oh my gosh, I mowed over a nest of baby bunnies, but they were all okay because of that. So thanks for sharing that information, that kind of stuff. And that to me was just as rewarding as releasing a patient back into the wild. So eventually, in 2020, Nashville Wildlife Conservation opened its own wildlife hospital. And we had the opportunity to really focus on quality of care, particularly for reptiles, small mammals, and songbirds. Because we were smaller, we could spend time reviewing video, measuring welfare, evaluating behavior, and continually asking, what is this animal telling us? Instead of assuming we already knew the answer when it came to caring for them. So with this knowledge, I really wanted to, help spread what I had learned. So I was speaking at conferences like the National Wildlife Rehabilitation Association and teaching for the International Wildlife Rehab Council. I kept coming into, and even to this day, I keep coming into kind of this, something that really surprised me, which is that so many rehabilitators are and were struggling with the exact same questions I had been asking years earlier. They cared deeply, but they didn't know why certain problems kept happening or how behavior science could help solve them, right? You come to these conferences, you learn these protocols, and you go to put them in place. But again, we're looking at it from our point of view, not the animal's point of view. So being able to share what our team had learned and help other centers improve welfare has really become one of the most rewarding parts of my career. Life has recently taken me from Tennessee to Arizona. And like you mentioned earlier, I currently teach veterinary students how to work with wildlife. I still get to work with wildlife every day, but now primarily help future veterinarians see welfare through the animal's perspective. So when they're handling them, when they're doing medical things, seeing the big picture of, is this animal releasable? Is it going to thrive post-release? Because what's the point of doing all this work if we're just putting them out and they're not surviving? And whether I'm teaching behavior, husbandry, handling, rehabilitation, it always comes back to the same lesson that changed my own career. If we slow down and ask what the learner or patient is experiencing instead of what we expect, we make better decisions for them, we improve welfare, and ultimately help more animals thrive. So I continue to learn and gain as much experience with education as possible through things like, going back to school to become a veterinary technician, and currently, hopefully, passing Karen Pryor Academy. But really looking back, that's the thread, so to speak, that's connecting everything I've done from rehabilitation to behavior, conservation, education, training. It's all about learning to see the world through the learner's eyes, through our patient's eyes, the animal's eyes, including humans, and adjusting things to meet their needs.
Thank you for sharing all of that, Debbie. What an interesting and diverse career experience you have had. Are you getting to do any of the prevention work that you talked about today, or not so much with your new role right now?
Not right now. It is in the works, though. So I have recently acquired a desert tortoise, and my goal is to get back into schools and the community to do education.
All right, that's exciting. I'll be excited to hear more about that as you do it. I can see where that work would be particularly meaningful for you to, like you said, catch things upstream before the animal is actually needing help, preventing that from happening in the first place. So yeah, I'm excited for you to continue pursuing that.
Me too.
Yeah. Good. And what did you say you had just acquired or were getting ready to acquire?
A desert tortoise. So in Arizona, they just have an overwhelming amount of desert tortoises because once they come into captivity, they can't be released back out. So if it's a wild turtle comes inside, it can't return back home, just due to some kind of Arizona laws. So they have so many that need to be adopted. And so I found the perfect girl.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. Does she have a name?
Her name is Prickly Pear.
Ah, that's very cute. I think I remember seeing that maybe on your Facebook page.
She's great.
Yeah. Well, congratulations to you and to Prickly Pear. She found the perfect home.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to take a minute to and acknowledge those mentors who you gave such generous shout outs to. I think you said, now I only got the last one you said's last name, Dr. Amanda Heelan, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's a science communicator and is absolutely fabulous when it comes to education and making things simple.
And then Gail and Lisa, I believe, were the other two. Is that right?
Gail Buell, she works for Partners for Wildlife and does something similar where she helps improve ambassador care for especially raptors at other centers. And then Elisa Fosco, she's currently at Wildlife and Needs Center there. She's the animal care director, but she's fabulous.
Right. Well, we love ripples on this show, as you know. And so I love hearing about the ripples that they spread in your life and that you are now spreading, I'm imagining, with the students who you're working with. So it's really cool to think about how their influence on you is shaping influence on others, or how you're having influence on others now. So wonderful. And I do not remember who the guest was. And I know that I've asked Ryan more than once, and then I keep forgetting. But that podcast that you referenced from a long time ago, the Animal Training Academy podcast that you referenced from a long time ago, that one really stood out to me too, as far as how we affect behavior change in people, like in a I think that podcast was in a zoo setting and you're talking about in a wildlife setting, but the same can be true in a companion animal setting. How do we kind of change those perspectives and behaviors? And I love to hear you talking about, I made a note and I'm not seeing, one small difference the next time they encounter wildlife, rather than giving all the information that we want to give and changing somebody's entire life all at once.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I do. And when I first started learning and seeing this, I think I was just so burnt out that, you go to these programs and you're like, don't, like it's just mice in your kitchen. Right. But and trying to just not, trying to think of the word, but not necessarily like shame them for not wanting it. But now as an adult, I'm like, oh yeah, it makes sense that you don't want mice running around in your kitchen. And so instead of telling people like, just let them live and let live or whatever, like, let's think of a better way to solve the problem so that everybody's happy. Because yeah, you don't want mice in your kitchen.
Right. And I think it goes back to that common thread that you were talking about that kind of ran through everything that you shared about. And that's thinking about things through the other's perspective, through the other's experience, and recognizing that I might be just fine with a possum in my backyard, that somebody else might not be. And there's a reason that they're not, whether that reason makes sense or comes easily to me in my head or not, there's a reason that they're not. And so if I want to be able to shift their behavior, I've got to be able to see things from their perspective a little bit.
Oh my gosh. It reminds me, there was one time we used to do programs we have this place called Opryland Hotel in Nashville, where people would it's an indoor, like nursery, just many different spaces in the hotel, and it's huge. But people would come to see our wildlife programs. And we did a possum one, and this guy came up and immediately like showed us a picture on his phone of him like holding a possum. I can't remember if he like shot it or just caught it, but it was by the tail. And thank goodness Amanda was there, because she was like, oh, that possum is huge. You're right. Instead of me, who definitely, I don't think I saved face when this man was showing me this picture. But she was able to connect with him. He stayed for the whole show, watched the possum, and what a much better experience than if I would have been like, why would you do that? Kind of shove my trauma onto him. He may not have stayed and then left and not been connected with a possum.
Yeah. Yeah. And perhaps there's something that he learned that impacted his behavior in one small way. Maybe it's not going to change his entire relationship with possums or wildlife, but maybe a little bit, maybe a little approximation.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's the way behavior is changed, right? It's usually not changed all in one fell swoop, but in successive approximations. So yeah, very cool. I'm curious about some more small changes. You talked about I did not know that I like to mow on the lowest setting so I can cut my grass down so short I don't have to cut it again for a while.
That's fair. Yeah.
I had no idea. It never occurred to me that by mowing on the highest setting, I could avoid injuring or worse critters that might be in my yard. Can you think of other small changes like that people can make that are beneficial to wildlife? Maybe even that are beneficial to those tortoises you were talking about. Can you think of anything there?
Quite a few, I would say. So there's a few big ones. So of course, if you can't mow at the highest setting, we always talk about how it's also better for grass to mow at the highest setting as well. And so it keeps it healthier longer. But then a few other things. So we would do in the fall, we'd have a big Leave Your Leaves campaign. And that was about giving people the permission to just be lazy and not rake up their leaves if that's what they needed. And so we had a sign that they could get where it would talk about leaving my leaves for wildlife. Or if that's not something, you have an HOA and you have to do that, just raking it up to a couple different piles. Because the way that not only our reptiles and amphibians survive the wintertime in the South, but all the other, I try to emphasize the reptile amphibian part, not so much the bug part, because that's not as exciting for people to help the bugs survive the wintertime. But they really need the leaves to help them form a nice thick blanket that insulates them, especially when it gets to, -17 and it's freezing for days at a time. The other big one is if you come across a turtle that's trying to cross the road, instead of trying to relocate it, right? Because you're thinking, oh my gosh, this turtle is in a very dangerous place. Chances are it's a mom, if it's an aquatic turtle, it's a mom going to either lay her eggs or going back to her pond after laying her eggs, or it's an eastern box turtle just trying to get to wherever it wants to be in its habitat. You just help them cross the road in the direction that they're traveling. So those were kind of our big ones. That's a longer CTA, but to kind of shorten it, Leave the Leaves, help them cross the road in the direction they're traveling.
Thank you for adding both of those for us. I really like that idea of very simple CTAs that people can implement easily like that.
Yes. Yeah. And it's such a game changer because, again, we used to bring all these animals to programs and talk about, this animal, this animal, this animal, but it wasn't getting to that end goal of the behavior change, but bringing in a turtle and turtle shell, showing them where the spine is and talking about, how when the lawnmower goes over them, it actually is spinal trauma. So they have to learn to walk again, like all those things, along with here's a cool turtle, really made a lot more of an impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I absolutely love what you said about people calling to tell you when they had done something and it had resulted in a positive outcome, how reinforcing for you. That's awesome.
My favorite.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. Well, Debbie, could you share with us now about, I'm sure you have a lot of training related challenges that you have experienced over the years, but could you share with us about one of those now and tell us a little bit about how you worked through it and some of the lessons you learned?
Oh, I feel like I learn so much every time I get to work with an animal or human. The most recent one that comes to mind is at the wildlife center I work at now. We had a rookery, or a huge communal nest of birds. In this case, it was herons and egrets, was purposefully cut down. And a lot of them did pass, but the surviving ones were brought into the wildlife center. So all at once, we had 13 babies come in, and we needed to make protocols and help volunteers basically learn how to care for these. And so a lot of that, I had just come from the South, and these were black crowned night herons. Snow egrets I've worked with before, but never black crown. We have yellow crown. And so I did a lot of natural history research, looking at pictures of the nest, looking at diet. Based off of these diets, what deficiencies do we need to worry about and kind of make up for? How do they age? When are they fledging? Like those kinds of things, so that we could create protocols that help allow these animals to thrive based on that natural history. But also, we needed to take this information and make it applicable for volunteers in this wildlife setting. So a lot of antecedent arrangements to help the volunteers thrive and make the human behaviors easier to follow. So I would kind of create a protocol and go and kind of show a volunteer and just say, hey, does this make sense? What questions do you have? And this all was done within, I think, 5 or 6 hours of those herons coming in. So it was a bit chaotic. So I would change a lot of things to account for potential mistakes ahead of time. Or, let's say this animal grows to this weight, we need to change what we're doing a little bit. And so changing, have all of those in mind. So it kind of reminds me of shaping, right? Like you're shaping the behavior, but you want to be ready for what's next. So they give you that what's next. And all of this, you can't have it be super overwhelming, which is hard to do with 13 or so babies of an uncommon species. So we also did lots of positive reinforcement for the volunteers. I made stickers that were called, it said Mother of Herons, and it was Game of Thrones themed, and it had herons with one snowy egret in it. Getting volunteers excited for these Muppet looking creatures that have daggers for mouths that want to stab you and are by no means easy. And then, talk about earless learning. You don't want any ears because that can mean injury or death. And so if there were ears, making sure I'm not blaming the learner, I'm not getting frustrated at them. They're not wrong, right? In this situation, just like your learner's never wrong. So figuring out the why behind it and adjusting all the protocols to help keep them moving forward. And all of these birds are now in pre-release stage and hopefully going to be released in the next couple of weeks.
That's super exciting that they're all getting ready to be released pretty soon, hopefully. I would love to hear if you can think of any, I would love to hear about some of the antecedent arrangements that you put in place to help make things easier for the human side of things.
Yes. So setting up the tables in front of where these herons were, because they had to weigh the animals. And some of these volunteers were never trained to weigh them. So they have, med services volunteers and they have daily care volunteers. And daily cares are doing the hand feeding, not the weighing. And so these people have to do a behavior they've never done before. So we set everything up on the table. Here's your scale. Here's the box to weigh them. Here's the supplements you need. We took pictures of the nests for the different groups. If they're in an incubator, their nest looks like this. If they're in a nest within the incubator, it looks like this. If they're out of the incubator, it looks like this. I'd make sample nests as well that were right outside so they could see exactly how the nest needed to be made. And then setting up, we also need to take them outside in the morning. So having the box there to take them outside in the morning so that they can then feed them. I had pictures of the fish and the sizes of the fish as well. So tried to make it, and then a schedule. So that was the other thing. It's like 7 a.m. this needs to be done. 11 a.m. this needs to be done. And keeping different groups, different colors so that you could follow it a little bit easier.
Thank you for sharing all that. I really like those things that you put into place to help make the human side of things a little bit more successful. And as somebody who works with people and dogs, I think that there is a lot of opportunity there for us too, as trainers and behavior consultants and going into homes. And I think about all the things that I ask people to do, like all the changes that I often ask for them to make. And I've gotten better about splitting that down into smaller steps, but certainly for me, I don't know about others listening, but certainly for me, there's a lot of opportunity in some of the stuff that you were just talking about there. You set the people up, you said, with the scale, with the box, with the table, with the schedule, with like all of these things to make all of this change that you're asking for a lot easier. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to do that in other areas of training and behavior too.
Man, and to me, I'm like, this black crown night heron situation was to me very simple, but I imagine for you, you're doing it in way more of a dynamic workspace where, if the dog is doing this, then we need to do this versus that, like there's way more kind of choose your own adventure type options there.
Yeah, for sure. I think so. But I do still think there is a lot that can be done as far as doing things on the front end for people when we're asking for so much change from them. I could do more on the front end for sure, as far as like scheduling and providing them with certain things that they might need to make that easier. So thank you for sharing all of that. I'm going to put it on a shelf in my brain and chew on how I might be able to use that. But I do think, in addition to being maybe a little more dynamic, like you were just saying, as you were talking, I was thinking how I think that organizations like the one that you're working for, like thinking about shelters and rescues and those types of things, organizations where you're working with a whole bunch of people coming in and out and a whole bunch of different animals all the time. I think that you guys do a really great job a lot of times of setting everybody up for success with what they need to make that happen. Schedules, pre-prepped enrichment items, all of those kinds of things. So, yeah. Very cool to hear about your experience with those birds and how you helped the volunteers do really well with them. And as far as the volunteers, you mentioned two kinds of volunteers. You said vet volunteers.
There's med services. So they go around and they do meds. They triage the patients that come in. And then daily care volunteers, and they do the cleaning and feeding and things.
And so I was just kind of guessing, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I was just kind of guessing those daily care volunteers are just people, maybe with a wide range of experience with animals, just people from the community who kind of want to get involved, but might not have a whole lot of experience.
I think so. I mean, they're both. So usually the daily care, you're right. It is, both of them are, ultimately, they don't necessarily have any medical background. The ones in med services, for the most part, have done daily care and then take a med services class after a certain period of time to gain those skills. So they still have some of the daily care experiences and they don't necessarily have the medical background, but they have the information they need, or the foundational knowledge that they need to do some of those skills they need for that role.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that would be really interesting place to be in, where you're working with a whole lot of different people with a wide range of experience levels and working with animals. Like you said, these guys, I think you said razor teeth, razor beaks.
Oh, stabby beaks. They just like one of their, you have to wear goggles around some of these, like great blue herons, because they will stab your eyes. So
yeah, so
I've got great aim.
Helping people avoid that. Yeah. Well, great, and congratulations on your success with those animals. And
I mean, it was really the majority of the work was, thankfully, the volunteers. They're probably like wildlife volunteers to me are just some of the best ones, because they come in week after week. They donate most of their time in their life. Most of them are there 3 days a week, all day, kicking butt. So I appreciate them.
Yeah, that's great. It's wonderful that you have so many people who are interested and dedicated and willing to help in that way. Would you share with us now about a training situation that you're proud of and or that you found reinforcing?
Yes, I would say the most exciting recent one that I think you saw was teaching Triss, who's a bearded dragon under my care, cooperative care, to brush her teeth. So I had been working on this behavior for a couple months and plateaued significantly. So I reached out to Kiki Yablin, which I know she's been mentioned so many times on this podcast. She's just a fabulous behaviorist and trainer. She gave me some really good just tips and pointers. And because of that, we made so much progress, and I'm able to do the full behavior of what I wanted it to look like. So at the end of the behavior, I never had the goal of being able to like brush her entire mouth in one go. It was always kind of like, let's go to the left, let's go to the right, let's go to the front, taking little breaks in between. And before I reached out to her, I was constantly putting Triss over her threshold just to go near her mouth. So I feel like, just having another set of eyes is so helpful to see if maybe there's another way to shape and arrange the antecedents to get to the end goal. Similar to, I had, this will be confusing. I had an Eastern mole named Elisa after my mentor, Elisa, because she fed this mole every 90 minutes, literally around the clock for weeks, and got her to adulthood and saved her. But she was an Eastern mole that we wanted to get out to do programs. And I was constantly asking her to go into my hand so that I could put her into her to-go container that was full of dirt. And we had this fabulous volunteer, Jake Blair, who is one of ABMA's vice presidents. I had him look at the situation. He was like, well, does she need to go into your hand to train this behavior? And I was like, oh, I guess not. She could just go straight into the actual to-go container, like stuff like that, where, Kiki's like, well, you could do it this way. And instead of trying to get one hand on her while opening her mouth, you could just go from the bottom and open the mouth. And I was like, oh my gosh, genius. Those kinds of things just blow my mind all the time.
Those kinds of things blow my mind too. I can think of so many times I've been working on a training project and I've had like an end goal in mind and am having trouble getting to that end goal. But the whole process to get there, I'm just kind of stuck on that process. It becomes very hard to, it doesn't even occur to me sometimes to think outside of the box and try to come up with a different plan entirely.
Oh my gosh, yes. And then, well, I am trying to now teach Tris to accept a syringe for oral medications and having issues with that, and reached out to the ATA community who is helpful in helping me figure this stuff out. But then all of a sudden, she has a lot of bad experiences because when I first got her, I had to give her this disgusting calcium that I couldn't disguise no matter what foods I used, and had to hold her to force her to take those kinds of things, unfortunately. And then Kiki reached out like yesterday or the day before, and she's like, well, what if you just put whatever good stuff in the syringe and then put the syringe on the dish so that she learns like good things come from the syringe. And I did that twice, and she's already like putting her nose to the syringe where I couldn't get her to even go near, like do a touch behavior or anything like that with a syringe. So again, thank you, Kiki.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that, I don't know if this will resonate with you or not, but I think that for me, part of it too is when it's my own animals, who I have such a close relationship with. Sometimes it becomes even when it's my own animals who I have a close relationship with, and it's something that's really pressing and important for their health and their well-being. That's when I tend to get more fixated on what I'm doing and not being able to think broadly and really needing those extra eyes to come in. I see you nodding. Does that?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I'm like, same thing in the vet tech world. If I have to do anything with my animals, I'm like a helpless, horrible, inconsolable owner. So, or pet parent, but yes. And same with training, like, oh my gosh, I have to train this behavior in 2 weeks. And yes, but that's why I'm grateful for this community. It's so good about, again, taking a step back and looking at it from the animal's point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, the importance of having a strong community around you, trusted colleagues, people you can bounce things off, I think can't be overstated. And ATA is fantastic for that. And Kiki is just a wonderful resource. As you mentioned, she has been mentioned countless times on this show, and she's actually been a guest on the show. She was one of our very first guests on the show. So I have worked with her in the past to help me with some stuff with one of my animals. And I can think of what we were working on now. And yeah, just kind of completely well, what if we did it this way instead, and like, oh yeah, I hadn't even considered that. So.
Genius lady.
Yeah, always great to have those extra eyes, and especially those extra really skilled and thoughtful eyes like that. So I'm glad that you have her to help you with Tris. And I have seen the brushing training with Tris. You've shared it in Animal Training Academy, as you mentioned, and it's just beautiful, lovely work you have done with her.
Thanks. I'm excited. I'm doing a talk called How to Train Your Dragon at Exotics 365 this year. And it's literally about training your dragon to brush your teeth. So I'm glad that we finished that behavior before that conference.
Oh, yeah, that's great. And congratulations, too. I know I saw that post that you put up the other day in the community about Tris and the syringe training. And congratulations that you chatted with Kiki about that, and that you have already made a shift that you're seeing some positive feedback from already. So I can't wait to hear how that continues to evolve for you.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Well, thank you so much for everything that you have shared so far. I would love to give you an opportunity if there's anything I haven't asked you about yet that you would like to share about.
Man, I love behavior and wildlife, and I'm so lucky I get to be a part of this group. I hope to connect with more wildlife people through Animal Training Academy, just because I miss it so much. And like you mentioned, I'm not doing as much ambassador training and stuff like that. So I like to stay engaged how I can. So please reach out if you do work with wildlife. And then maybe I get to see people we have the Clinical Animal Behavior Conference in October. I mentioned this already, but I'm speaking at Exotics 365 at the end of August. And then I'll be teaching a Wildlife Foundations course in the fall in Arizona through the International Wildlife Rehabilitation Council. So if anything, if you are in wildlife rehabilitation or interested, or anywhere where you're taking care of animals and you're just struggling with welfare or wanting to evaluate your animals to make sure that your protocols are good, but don't know where to start, just know that you're not alone. And I've been through it. I know a lot of people in the ATA community are so open about, helping, having been there before. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So thank you for being there in that community.
And how could people get in touch with you? If there are other wildlife people out there, or people who are just interested in wildlife, or people who are interested in any of those learning opportunities that you mentioned, how should they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I still have my old email. It's just Debbie at NashvilleWildlifeConservation.org. So very long email, but at least it's simple. Nashville, like Nashville, Tennessee, not national. And then just through the ATA community as well, whether it's the Facebook group or whatever. I love that community since I've joined and have tried to stay pretty engaged in it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for all of that. Debbie, from myself, from ATA, on behalf of everybody listening today, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join us. And thank you so much for all the work that you do to support wildlife and people in the world as well.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
We do, of course, appreciate all of you tuning in as well. And if you have enjoyed this episode and are interested in carrying on the conversation about working with the animals in our lives in the most positive, most fun, and most choice-rich ways, then as mentioned at the start of this episode, the Animal Training Academy community is waiting for you. Head on over to www.atamember.com and click on the membership button in the main menu to learn more about what members are describing as the Netflix social media platform for behavior geeks. That's it for this episode, though. Thank you so much for listening. You'll hear from us again soon.